Alright, here's my story, told with all the twists and raw emotions you'd expect from a post on Reddit. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would betray the man I love. But 3 days before my wedding to Jake, I crossed a line I can never undo. It all started innocently enough, or at least that's what I told myself. Jake and I had been together for 6 years. We met during our senior year in college at a party neither of us had wanted to go to. I spilled a drink on him, he made a sarcastic comment about me owing him a new shirt, and that was that. He was everything I'd ever wanted, steady, kind, loyal. But if I'm being honest, I think the comfort he gave me was a double-edged sword. As the wedding day loomed closer, the excitement of being with him forever dulled into fear that my life would become too predictable, too safe. The trouble began when I ran into Ryan at my bachelorette party. Ryan was the definition of a what if. We dated briefly before I met Jake, and our relationship was a whirlwind of passion, impulsiveness, and late-night drives to nowhere. But Ryan was unreliable. He couldn't hold down a job, he was terrible at communicating, and he had a tendency to disappear when things got tough. I knew Jake was better for me. But seeing Ryan that night stirred something in me I didn't want to face. He was bartending at the lounge where my friends had taken me. I spotted him as soon as I walked in, and for a moment, I considered leaving. But curiosity got the better of me. He hadn't changed much, still had that cocky grin, the tattoos peeking out from under his shirt sleeves. When he saw me, his eyes lit up in recognition. Emma? No way. You look, wow. I blushed like a schoolgirl, and that was my first mistake. 1 drink turned into 3. We reminisced about the past, about our wild nights and our almosts. At some point, the conversation shifted. Why didn't it work out with us? He asked, his voice softer than I remembered. Because you were a disaster, I laughed, though there was an edge to my words. And I needed someone stable. Like your fiance? I nodded but felt a pang of doubt. Yeah, like Jake. Ryan leaned in closer, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, something dark and intoxicating. Does he make you feel alive, though? I froze. He had no right to ask me that, but the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't remember the last time Jake and I had done something spontaneous, something that made my heart race. Our life together was planned to perfection, every detail of our future mapped out. The night ended without incident, if you don't count the fact that I couldn't stop thinking about Ryan after I got home. The next morning, I convinced myself it was just nostalgia. But then Ryan texted me. Breakfast? One last time before you're a married woman. I knew I should have ignored it. Instead, I found myself at a small diner across town, sitting across from the man who had once been my biggest weakness. We talked for hours. It felt like slipping into an old habit, dangerous, familiar, addictive. By the time he walked me to my car, my resolve was paper thin. I should go, I whispered, but I didn't move. Ryan brushed a strand of hair from my face. You don't have to. And then it happened. I kissed him. Or maybe he kissed me. I don't even remember who leaned in first. All I know is that it didn't stop there. We ended up back at his apartment, and for the first time in years, I felt that electric thrill I'd been missing. But when it was over, reality hit me like a tidal wave. I was supposed to be getting married in 3 days. What the hell had I just done? I left without saying much. The guilt was suffocating. I avoided Jake all day, claiming I was busy with last-minute wedding prep. My friends noticed I was acting off, but I played it cool as best as I could. That night, Jake surprised me by showing up at my apartment with takeout. He wanted to spend time together before the chaos of the wedding weekend began. As we ate, he held my hand and said, I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you, Emma. You're my best friend. I nearly burst into tears right then and there. Jake deserved better than this. I wanted to tell him the truth, to beg for forgiveness, but I was terrified. What if he called off the wedding? What if I lost him forever? The next 2 days were a blur of rehearsals and family gatherings. I kept up the facade, but inside, I was falling apart. Ryan didn't contact me again, and I was grateful for that. It was like he knew this wasn't a choice I could make twice. On the morning of the wedding, I stared at myself in the mirror, dressed in white and surrounded by my bridesmaids. My mom was fussing over my veil, and my best friend, Ashley, gave me a knowing look. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No. I did something terrible, Ash." Her eyes widened, but she didn't push me for details. "Do you love Jake?" "Yes," I whispered. And I did. But I also knew that something was broken inside me. The ceremony went off without a hitch. When Jake said his vows, I cried, not just because of the beautiful words, but because I didn't feel worthy of them. When it was my turn, I almost choked. But then I looked into his eyes and saw the life we had built together. I made a choice in that moment. I would never let him find out. I would carry the weight of my betrayal alone. It's been 6 months since the wedding. I haven't spoken to Ryan since that night. I still think about him sometimes, about the version of myself that existed when I was with him. But I've come to realize that excitement doesn't equal happiness. Jake is my rock, and I'm working every day to be the partner he deserves. Some might say I should have confessed, but I chose a different path. I chose us. And I can only hope that's enough. What would you have done in my shoes? Alright, let's turn up the intensity. Buckle up. I thought I could leave it behind. That one night with Ryan. Bury it deep, where no one could find it, not even me. But secrets have a way of festering, turning into something darker, something that haunts you when you least expect it. And 3 weeks after the wedding, it started to unravel. It began with a text. At first, I thought it was from Ashley or one of my bridesmaids, someone asking about thank you notes or post-wedding plans. But when I looked at my phone, my stomach dropped. "We need to talk. It's important." It was from Ryan. My hands shook. I didn't want to open the message. But I did. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. I wasn't going to say anything, but you should know, someone saw us. That night. I read the words over and over until they blurred. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. Someone had seen us? Who? How? I thought we had been careful. No one knew I had met up with him. No one was supposed to know. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I deleted the message and tried to move on with my day. But that night, lying next to Jake in bed, the walls of my mind started closing in. Every sound seemed louder, the creak of the house settling, the distant hum of traffic outside. Jake shifted beside me and whispered, half asleep, "You okay, babe?" I froze. "Yeah. Just, can't sleep." He reached out and pulled me closer. "You've been acting weird lately. Is everything alright?" I hesitated. "Yeah, just wedding stress. I think it's finally catching up with me." He murmured something I couldn't make out and drifted back to sleep. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. The next morning, I decided to confront Ryan. I couldn't let this hang over my head any longer. I called him and told him to meet me at a park on the edge of town. It was secluded, somewhere I could control the situation. When he showed up, he was wearing that same smirk, like this was some game. But I wasn't in the mood for games. "Who saw us?" I demanded before he could say a word. Ryan shrugged. "Relax. It's not like they're going to tell Jake. I doubt they even knew who you were. That's not the point. I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. You don't understand, this could ruin my life. Emma, you're blowing this out of proportion. People hook up all the time. It's not like you're the first bride-to-be to have cold feet. I stepped closer, my voice low and cold. This isn't just about me. It's about Jake. He trusts me. And if he finds out? Ryan finally looked serious. Okay. I get it. Look, I didn't want to drag you into this. But the guy who saw us, he knows me. And he's not exactly a fan. My throat tightened. What does he want? Ryan sighed. Money, probably. Or leverage. I don't know. But I can handle it. Handle it? I laughed bitterly. You couldn't handle your own life when we were together. Why should I trust you now? His jaw clenched. Because I care about you. More than you think. That stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that he didn't get to say things like that after everything he'd put me through. But there was no time for that now. Just fix it, I said quietly. Whatever it takes. I don't want this coming back to me. He nodded. I will. I promise. For a while, it seemed like the problem had gone away. But paranoia has a way of eating at you. I started noticing things. A man standing too long outside our house. A car parked near my office with tinted windows. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe not. One night, I came home to find an envelope on the doorstep. No return address. No name. Just my first initial scrawled across the front. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photos. Photos of me and Ryan, at the diner, walking to his car, kissing in the shadows of the parking lot. There was no note, no explanation. Just the evidence, laid out for me like a ticking time bomb. I sank to the floor, the walls closing in again. This was it. My perfect life was about to implode. Jake would see the truth. He would leave me. Everyone would know what I'd done. I don't know how long I sat there, paralyzed by fear. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I burned the photos in the sink, watching the flames consume my worst mistake. But I knew it wasn't over. Whoever sent them wasn't finished with me. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for my world to crumble around me. I was going to take control. But the question was, how far would I go to keep my secret safe? What would you do in my position? Would you confess and risk losing everything, or fight to keep the truth buried? Because sometimes, the lies we tell to protect ourselves can become the chains that bind us. And I wasn't ready to be shackled. Not yet. Alright, here's the final act with all the drama and tension you've been waiting for. For the next few days, I was constantly on edge. I jumped at every noise, every phone call. Jake noticed, of course. He wasn't stupid. You've been acting like someone's out to get you, he said one evening as we sat on the couch. His tone was light, but there was concern behind his eyes. Is there something you're not telling me? My throat went dry. I wanted to confess everything right there. Tell him about Ryan, the photos, the whole mess I'd made. But I couldn't. I wasn't ready to lose him. I'm fine, I lied, forcing a smile. Just work stress. He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. For now. That night, I got another message. This time, it wasn't from Ryan. Meet me at the old factory on Ridge Street. Midnight. Don't be late. No name. But I didn't need one. Whoever had those photos was calling the shots now. I pulled up to the abandoned factory just before midnight. The place was as creepy as hell, broken windows, rusted metal, shadows stretching like claws across the ground. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped out of the car. The air was cold and still. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing in the empty space. A figure emerged from the darkness. It wasn't Ryan. It was someone else, a man in his late 30s, with a shaved head and a menacing grin. "You must be Emma," he said. His voice was low, almost playful. "I've heard a lot about you." I crossed my arms, trying to appear braver than I felt. "What do you want?" He chuckled. "Straight to the point." "I like that. I want to make you a deal. See, these photos you're so worried about, they could cause a lot of damage. But I'm a reasonable guy. You give me what I want, and they disappear. Simple. What exactly do you want?" "Money," he said, shrugging. "Ryan owes me a lot of it. And since he's not good for it, I figured I'd come to the next best option, you." I clenched my fists. Of course. Ryan had dragged me into his mess, just like he always did. "I don't have that kind of money," I said. "And even if I did, I'm not paying you." The man's smile faded. "I don't think you understand how this works. If you don't cooperate, your husband's going to see those photos. And I'm guessing he won't be too happy about it." The threat hung in the air like a knife. For a moment, I thought about giving in. Paying him off. But then a surge of anger took over. I was done being a pawn in other people's games. I wasn't going to let this man, or Ryan, or anyone else ruin my life. "I'm not afraid of you," I said, stepping closer. "Go ahead. Send the photos. But if you do, I swear I'll go to the cops. Blackmail's a crime, in case you didn't know. And I'm sure they'd love to know what you've been up to." The man's eyes narrowed. For a moment, I thought he might hit me. But then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "All right," he said. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But this isn't over. You might want to watch your back, sweetheart." He turned and disappeared into the shadows. I drove home shaking but relieved. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control again. The photos might still be out there, but I wasn't going to live in fear anymore. I was done letting my mistakes define me. When I walked through the door, Jake was waiting for me. His expression was a mix of confusion and worry. "Where were you?" he asked. "It's after midnight." I hesitated, then took a deep breath. I needed some air. "I've been going through some things, Jake. Things I haven't told you." His face softened. "What kind of things?" I sat down beside him and finally, after all this time, started to open up. I didn't tell him everything, not about Ryan or the photos. But I told him enough. About my fears, my doubts, the pressure I'd been feeling. "I love you," I said, my voice breaking. I want to be the person you deserve." Jake took my hand and squeezed it. "Emma, you don't have to be perfect. I married you because I love you, flaws and all. Whatever's going on, we'll get through it. Together." And just like that, the weight on my chest began to lift. It's been 3 months since that night. The photos never resurfaced. I cut all ties with Ryan and focused on rebuilding my life with Jake. We're stronger now than we've ever been. But the past still lingers like a shadow, a reminder of the choices I made. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have fought back or crumbled under the pressure? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. Your support means the world to me. And hey, maybe next time, I'll share a story that doesn't involve me almost losing everything. Or maybe I'll share what happened next.